morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tutul Dialogues, short conversations with unique individuals. I'm very, very happy to introduce to you and invite a very special guest today on the Tutul Dialogues, Jeffrey Lipsius. Jeffrey is the director of the Inner Game School of Sales Leadership and author of the award-winning book, Selling to the Point. He's a certified inner game facilitator and coach. Jeffrey co-created the inner game approach for sales leadership with Timothy Galway. Timothy Galway is widely regarded to be the father of modern coaching. Jeffrey has over 40 years of experience training in the selling profession. Jeffrey and Tim train sales forces worldwide to achieve their peak selling performance through the inner game sales and leadership method. In my conversations with Jeffrey in the past, there is something very unique that he brings to the table, which is the intersection between spirituality and performance. He's also, I think, an Indiophile and loves Bollywood, and it's such a great. I told him that I live very close to some of his favorite stars, about 3 kilometers away. So we'll talk more about that as we get on. But welcome to our dialogues, Jeffrey. It's so great to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much, Sujata.
Okay, so maybe I'll start with the first question, which is, tell us a little bit about your journey as a sales professional, and then how you became a master facilitator and coach. And is there any defining or turning moment that made you do what you do?
Well, the defining moment was when I read Tim Galway's book, The Inner Game of Tennis. And at the time, I was in college and I was a tennis player. I had no idea anything about sales. And I just wanted to be a better tennis player. Also, the year before I got Tim's book, the year before Tim's book came out, I got the idea that perhaps if I learned meditation, it might help my tennis, because then I would be able to practice my state of mind for a tennis match, just like I practice a forehand and backhand. And I sought out a meditation teacher, you would call it a guru. And I was 19 years old when I learned the techniques of meditation that originally was to help my tennis, but it blossomed into a lot more things. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because we're talking about peak performance and how one's mindset affects one's performance. I didn't make it in the pros as a tennis player, so I had to get a real job, and I went into selling. At that point, I became friends with Tim, the author of the Inner Game of Tennis book. And as time went on, I became vice president of the company. I had always kept the vision of applying my insights from this meditation practice into everything I do on the outside, whether it was tennis, whether it was selling. And over the course of time, I was not only the best salesperson in the company, but actually was promoted to vice president. So I called Tim up and said, hey, I have over 100 salespeople under me. Why don't we try applying your inner game approach of mindset to selling, and we could use my sales force as a laboratory. It all started with Tim Galway's book, The Inner Game of Tennis, which talks about how the right mindset can enhance peak performance. And that was my journey. So the inside, which was my mindset, my connection with my true self, was integrated with my performance on the outside at all times during my life.
So tell us, you said you started meditation at the age of 19. Tell us a little bit about, even though you didn't make it to the pros, how did it help you become a better tennis player? And how did it help you personally become a better salesperson? And then we'll talk about how you helped so many people.
Sure. Well, the first thing, as a tennis player, I noticed that when there's a very important point that is more important for me to win than most of the other points, it would come to my mind, uh-oh, I better win this. And the harder I would try, actually, it would have the opposite effect. And I was asking myself, well, how can I control what's going on the inside? And I thought meditation was going to be a great application of that. So once I learned, I was able to stay focused, and it actually helped me be more aware of what's taking place on the court rather than thinking. Now, this is something that is rather counterintuitive about peak performance. And what I noticed about tennis is that, notice when I said there was something in my head telling me that it was an important point and that actually sabotaged my performance. Well, when something's going on in my head, that's inner. But what the meditation helped me do is focus on the outer. And that's something that people don't really understand when they're applying meditation to performance. They're thinking, oh, it's going to help me be more self-conscious. Well, if you're applying it to an activity, you actually want to be outcome focused, not self-focused. That's a little misunderstanding people have. The reason for that is because if we said peak performance is performing beyond expectations, well, you can't expect to perform beyond your expectations, can you?
You're setting a limit for yourself. Yes, yes.
Yes, so you have to set a limit for yourself and focus your awareness on the real goal, which in the case of performance, in the case of selling, would be the customer. So in tennis, meditation would help me focus on the ball. Maybe even focus on the seams of the ball to get very, very focused and aware of something that's taking place that my body needs to know in order to hit a good shot. In selling, it's the same thing, except the ball for a salesperson is the customer. And the seams of the ball is their decision process. So once more, people in selling, like there's a lot of books out on selling and mindfulness and applying mindset to selling. They're always talking about the salesperson's mindset. And that leads into ego-driven things. Does the customer like me? Does the customer trust me? Does the customer think I'm smart? All this distracting ego would be a side agenda from the true goal. And what's the true goal? Is the customer, the quality of the customer's decision-making, which is outer, not inner. Because what happened one time, I was in an appointment with a customer, and I was meditating during the important, my eyes weren't shut, but I was focused in that place inside. And everything got quiet. And without the distracting mind, I heard for the first time a second conversation that was happening that I was never aware of before. It was the decision-making going on between the customer's ears, that inner conversation. And I could pick up on it. by the customer's responses, by the customer's facial expressions. And as long as I kept my mind quiet, I could be more aware of the seams of the ball, which is the decision process, which allows me to respond better. And one thing I say in my book on selling is the best responding salespeople are going to be the most successful salespeople. So it all comes together.
So the seams of the ball on a tennis court is equal to the customer's decision-making process.
Yes,
wow, very nice.
Because the goal of selling isn't selling, it's buying. Yeah, a salesperson doesn't get commission for how much selling they do. They only get paid for how much buying the customer does. So the salesperson has to be much more invested in the customer's buying performance than their own selling performance. And that requires putting ego aside, which my meditation practice helps me with tremendously.
So we hear a lot about the formula performance is equal to potential minus interference, and the real inner game and the outer game. And can you explain this formula to us? I think you've already started explaining it, but can you help us understand for those who haven't heard it before?
Yeah, so the inner game, I'll start from the beginning and I'll get to those principles. But back in the 1970s, Timothy Galway, who's my friend and my mentor, my partner in business, and he created this inner game method, basically writing a book on tennis, which transformed the performance coaching field. I mean, he had so many insights that changed the way performance actually worked with people. So now every world-class athlete has a performance coach on their team, for mindset. Well, that was thanks to Tim Galway. So what Tim basically says is you can't win the outer game without winning the inner game. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. Let's say I played tennis with Roger Federer.
Wow, okay. Roger Federer.
Okay. And he beats me 6-1, 6-0. Okay. I got a game off of Roger Federer. I lost the outer game, which is the score. Roger Federer got a higher score than me, so I lost the outer game. But how do I feel? I feel like a winner. Here I am, 70 years old, getting a game off of Roger Federer. I fulfilled my potential. So I won the inner game, which is fulfilling my potential, even though I lost the outer game. Now, it's a matter of focus that you need to trust the inner game and ignore the outer game. In other words, I have to trust in my focus of attention that if I pay attention to my achieving my full potential, the outer game, which is the score, is going to take care of itself. The last piece is that if I'm focused on the outer game, I'll sabotage it because I'm distracted from my real goal, which is to achieve my full potential as a tennis player, whatever that potential is. I need to discover it. So that's the inner game. Now, you were asking me about P equals P minus I. Very famous formula by Tim. He's basically saying that a coach, or to achieve peak performance, it's more a matter of removing interference and unlearning, because potential's always there. So P, the first P, is one's performance achievement. So for a customer, because we're talking about customers' buying performance, okay, it would be the quality of the decision the customer makes, the customer's performance, okay, equals the lowercase p, which is the customer's potential for making a good decision, minus the interference. So what could be an example of interference to good decision making? And an example could be trust. Now, this is where salespeople and sales training get the whole concept of peak performance wrong. Because if I say to a salesperson, what about trust? Does that play a role in what you do? They'll say, oh, yeah. I need to earn the customer's trust. I need the customer to trust what I'm saying is true. Any salesperson would agree with that. But that's outer trust. That's the customer's trust of the salesperson. It's outer. And remember what I said, you can't win the outer game without winning the inner game. So what would be inner trust? Well, that would be the customer's self-trust in their ability as a decision maker. The salesperson won't get the customer's trust without inner trust, without the customer trusting themselves to decide if they can trust the salesperson. Okay, so P equals P minus I. The customer's decision performance equals their potential for making a good decision minus the interference. The interference, an example, would be self-doubt. The customer's self-doubt and their ability to make a good decision will interfere with their potential and result in a bad performance. For example, a customer with self-doubt might make an inappropriately conservative decision because of the interference that the self-doubt caused. So that's P equals P minus I. Is there any, do you have any questions about that? Was that pretty clear for you?
Yes, it is. In fact, I was just smiling because you can actually see in slow motion, if you pay attention, about how the customer is feeling about making that decision, how confident they feel, how unsure they feel. And if you see that and you allow them the space where they find themselves and they make that decision calmly, then they're relaxed about it. So I observe the process and I empathize with them. It's not about whether we win or not, but because they're making a decision and they're saying that, what you do when you sell something to me will reflect on how well I chose you. And it's that connection with people that if you listen, it actually takes place in slow motion. You can actually see it.
Yes, if
Yeah.
you're conscious.
Yes.
Yes, if you're consciously aware.
So one of our greatest cricketers in India, Gavaskar, used to say, I think he's written somewhere that people said that, you're such a great cricketer and how do you do this? And he says, well, the stadium is cheering and there's a lot of noise, but when the ball leaves the hand of the bowler, then I don't hear anything. All I can see is the ball. And all I can see is that I have to hit the ball. And I have not thought about where it's going to go. But it sort of happens in slow motion, and that sort of allows you to connect with the customer. So
Yes.
I think you've explained it really beautifully and simply, which is connecting with the decision-making process of the customer, and instead of looking at making that sale. In your seminars on sales, what are the kind of questions? I'm sure lots of people have attended, lakhs and lakhs of people have attended, or thousands of them have attended your programs. What are the typical assumptions and beliefs they come in, and what are the new beliefs they leave with? Could you share a few examples of that?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing I tell the group is that I am not your teacher. Your customer is your teacher. And my job in this workshop is to show you how you can learn how to learn from your customers. And that means the source of wisdom is always going to be around. After the workshop's done, I leave. If I'm the teacher, whatever knowledge I have leaves with me, and salespeople tend to revert back to their original behavior. But if the customer's the teacher, there's always going to be a source of learning. Now, what I do that salespeople really like is I say, you're not doing anything wrong, okay? These customers are not always making decisions in their best interest. So let's look at the decision process and what's going on with them and see if first we could just understand it without judging it. Because what happens is that, you know, salespeople, of course, they have a lot of expectations put on them, both from themselves and from the company. And they try to sell, okay? Like I said, you can't expect to perform beyond your expectations. So if you're trying to sell, how does the customer feel? Let's say there's a salesperson and a manager, and the salesperson is about to lose their, you know, they're not making their goals. And the manager says, what are you going to do? And the salesperson says, I'm really going to try. I'm going to try hard. And everybody says, well, that's great. The manager was talking to the salesperson and counseled them, and the salesperson's making a commitment. What they're forgetting is how you, the customer, are going to feel talking to this salesperson who really is under pressure to make their goals. You're going to feel like they're pushy. You're going to feel like invisible, like I'm just a means to an end to this person. They don't want to really hear what my situation is. They just want to get the sale. They're trying to sell. And in peak performance, when you try to do something, you're actually interfering or sabotaging it from actually happening. If you're trying to sleep, are you sleeping?
You're trying to sleep.
Actually,
You don't get sleep. Yeah.
well, actually, it's the trying that'll keep you up, right? If I'm trying to like you, do I like you? If I'm trying to have fun, am I having fun? Right? If I'm trying to meditate, am I meditating? I mean, so if you're trying to sell, are you selling? No. So this is what I want to do, is get salespeople to focus on the seams of the ball, which is their customer's decision process. So they don't feel that they have to try. Instead, they have to learn. And the salesperson is the learner, not the teacher. So these are the main principles that I put forward when I'm doing my workshop.
It seems very counterintuitive, isn't it? The customer is the teacher. When you focus on the inner game, you actually do a better job in the outer game because it's not outcome focused. It's a very different way of looking at things. I'll come to the last question, which is you've been a follower of Prem Rawatji, Sadhguru Prem Rawatji. Could you tell us a little bit about your connection with him and his journey?
Yeah, well, what can I say? The story of my life, everybody's life has a story.
That's right.
And in my life story, I have a hero. and it's Prem Rawat, because he gave me the perspective about my true potential to feel joy for being alive, and enjoying the miracle of the existence that I've been given, when I had completely forgotten about it. And so he gave me that ability to see myself in a way that is separate from conditions. Okay, so when people say they're happy, usually you say, oh, about what? What are you happy about? What's making you happy? And the more we put conditions on the happiness that we feel, the more at risk that happiness becomes. Because now, all of a sudden, there's a lot of pressure to arrange those conditions in a way. I have to meet those conditions in order to be happy. And then you get into, well, maybe I can do that, maybe I can't. It's a struggle to meet those conditions all the time. And all of a sudden, happiness becomes relative. And what Prem Rawat did for me above all is to say, well, give me a way to be happy, to feel joy unconditionally. As long as I have this existence, there's a source of joy that always I can tap into, regardless of what's happening on the outside. And that's just the biggest gift I've received in my life.
Where is Sadhguru Prem Rawat ji based? Or is he traveling?
He has a center in Delhi called RVK, Raj Vidya Kandar. His home base is in Malibu, California, which isn't that far from me, where I live, actually. But most of the time he's traveling around the world talking. One thing that a project that he has right now is called the Peace Education Project. He goes to some of the world's most notorious prisons. And this is a big project for him right now, because he says, if you could create peace in prisons, you can create peace anywhere. And he speaks to the prisoners and he says, look, you have choice too. And, there's an empowerment that you can give yourself. And it's a very successful program that he finds very rewarding. He's always talking about it. So, yeah, that's what he's up to these days.
I hope to go and get a chance to meet him when he's next in India. And I will tell him that I had a chance to interact with you.
Yes, I think he's going back to India in a few months. I could let you know where he's speaking.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're almost at the end of our dialogue. Is there anything else that you would like to say or ask me before I start summarizing what we've learned?
Yeah, well, I was interested in your coaching journey too, because it sounded very interesting that it sounds like you're pretty selective about the people that you want to coach. Is that right?
It's just that somehow the universe connects people to me. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my coaching journey. I used to work in a consulting organization, and in the early 2000s, there was a lot of focus on feedback, performance feedback, and counseling. So we used to use Carl Rogers and Karpf's method. And I remember there is one part of that which talks about deep empathy and respect, and it really makes you reframe your own beliefs. I think I still have a long way to go, but at least I understand it. And then it became, in consulting, we started teaching managers how to be better coaches by listening and asking questions instead of rushing to give solutions. most managers in particularly I have found in manufacturing in the early 2000s are very parental. They know the answer, so they're like ATM machines, they would immediately rush in, and we spend doing that. And then about 12 or 14 years ago, I started coaching. It's strange, people reach out to me, clients reach out to me. There's always either we're helping people prepare for a new role, or there's somebody whose behavior is not sort of fitting in with the context, or we have someone who is trying to create something much bigger. But a lot of other than the corporate coaching that I do, there are a lot of people who call me out of the blue saying, I need help. And can you speak to my niece? Can you help this person? And I sometimes don't even meet them, but I coach a lot of people informally, and they become friends. So I don't charge if someone reaches out to me personally. I feel it's something that one does, because there are so many people who mentor you and you coach you along the way. But I think my method of coaching is to be with that person and experience that person's energy. And then depending on what emerges, I ask the right questions, or I try and help the person along. And I think the calmer I become, and when I'm not trying to control the coaching session, the results are so much better. But when I'm saying I have to get these 15 things done, it doesn't. So yes, it's been a journey. And I watch the way people have coached. I don't talk about them, I don't write about them, but you're not supposed to as a coach. But when I see them doing what they do, and sometimes they'll write a note to me saying, did this, did that, I feel really, really happy. So it's been many, many years of coaching, but I think I do so much more informal coaching for people I don't even know. I mean, they just come out of the blue and they say, please help. I really enjoy that part of my job. So that's what we do.
And you don't know what you're going to say until you sit with the person and see what just emerges.
Yes. Yes. I have team of very good coaches at Tutul. They do a very structured, objective way. They work with teams and individuals. We also work with teams and individuals, but sometimes you have these short 10, 15 coaching moments. You're speaking to a client, it's the end of the session, you're leaving, and the client says, I want to talk to you about something. And those 15 minutes becomes a coaching session. And sometimes both of us leave that session saying, oh, that was something new that emerged. So I think the more, I once had this experience where I was in a meeting and there were lots of people arguing. It was a client meeting, and suddenly I found everything happening around me in slow motion. And I found myself watching them, and I realized that the calmer I am, the answers emerge. But if I'm anxious, then I don't do as good a job. So I guess that's been my journey. I still have a long way to go, but it is so great to connect with you, Jeffrey. I think there's so many interesting takeaways from today's conversation. I'd just like to summarize. I'm separate from my conditions. I can be joyous regardless of anything. I think that's the number one. Second one is that for those salespeople watching, is that your customer is your teacher. Watch the customer's decision-making process like you watch the seams of the ball. And when you watch something closely, time slows down and you can see it clearly, and then you automatically decide how to respond. And the thing that I really, really learned is that it's not about the customer trusting you, but the customer trusting themselves to make that decision and remove the inner interference. So I think this is a great insight for me on this Friday morning, and for you Thursday evening. Thank you very, very much for your time and wisdom.
Thank you,
Jeffrey.
Sujata.
And I hope we
Yes,
can
thank
speak to you again. Take care.
Dhanyavad. Okay,
Dhanyavad.
namaste.
Namaste.